What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the next part of our EB48 2.2 kit build. We're going to be working on bag H, which will be part 9, the front spindle and carrier assembly. First thing we're going to do, as per usual, is go ahead and get everything organized. So we'll speed up this footage and we'll jump back when I've got the build starting. And there we are, very quickly into progression here. We're gonna start out by throwing our bearings and axles, driveline stuff into the actual spindle itself. So we'll go ahead and get those bearings in. Those are gonna be some 8x16x5s, and I believe some larger, like 1218 4s, I wanna say. Then we'll go ahead and get our hex and hex pin installed, and then we can grab our nice big set screw and get that guy locked in. You can use Loctite on this. It's not required at all. I personally don't use Loctite just because I don't like it to get too locked in there. I've never had any issues backing out, but a small dab is definitely never a huge problem by any means. Now we'll go ahead, get our other side set in, get that hex on. One thing I will give a heads up on is that on these hex pins, there is a flat spot on them. You do want to make sure that you get your set screw set in that little pit. That way, again, you just have the least likely scenario of having that set screw or pin come out during a race. I believe with a buggy, in theory, once you have the wheel on, that pin should be totally covered, but it is, of course, always better safe than sorry. Now we'll go ahead and get our Ackermann plates put on. At this point, just figuring out which side is left and right. Always not a fun time when you start accidentally mismatching parts, because they are very similar to one another, but there is, of course, a left and right difference. So once you figure out which side is which, then you can go ahead and start getting your plates bolted on, which is just going to be a couple of button head screws. As you can see, I am a total and complete novice here, already dropping screws, and we are barely into this bag. So go ahead and grab our other screw. What I do is I just kind of get the first screw started, get the second one in, that way both screws are lined up while the plate is loose, and then you just kind of go back and forth on each side. That way you can get the plate bolted without having any sort of binding on it. In theory, the plate and screws should ride freely of one another, but a lot of times if you have both screws in, it'll start to get kind of cockeyed. So you have to walk it in a little bit slowly, but nothing that's super crazy at all, especially if you're just using the drill. It's very quick to get everything put in. And there you can see, again, total novice. One thing I've learned is that while I'm doing these build videos, is I kind of rush a little bit. That way I don't seem like I'm taking too terribly long. So apologies for me being a complete noob. But as you can see, we do now have our Ackermann plates on our couple of spindles here. So we've got driveline and hex all mounted in, and now we are getting the Ackermanns finalized into position. Now what we can do is, after doing a quick reference of the manual and just kind of figuring out which top hats go where. I call them top hats because that's what they're shaped like, but they are the bushings that the carriers and the arms will ride on. So there's gonna be two different types there. There's gonna be a long one and a short one in the sense of the actual thickness of the head of it. The skinnier ones, the more shallow thickness, will go onto your arms when you actually mount these onto the main front clip. And then the thicker ones is what you're actually gonna use to adjust your height inside the caster block itself there. So now what we're gonna go ahead and do is just do the lovely process of getting everything kind of slid together. This is another thing that it visually off the car looks funky, so it takes a minute to kind of visualize it as if it is on the car itself, and then we can go ahead and get it slid on into place. These can be a little bit of a pain, but you can see once I got the kind of final bit of shimming done, sometimes the top hats don't sit straight into place. You got to give them just a little bit extra push. That way everything flows together all nice and smooth. Once you do get it into the caster block, there are going to be a couple different pins to look at. Same thing, there's going to be the pins that you actually mount these pieces onto the arms with, and then there's the pins that of course mount the carrier and spindle all together. So you want to make sure you do get those separated. The ones that are going to go into the spindle are going to be a little bit smaller, and there'll be a silver one and a black one, and that'll go with each of the different top hats you get, because you do get 2 different heights, and that's what allows you to set the height of the axle itself inside that carrier. Now we've got those guys in, you'll lock those in with some button head screws. You'll see we'll do the same thing on this side. We'll put the silver chrome one on top, whatever color you prefer to call that, and then the black one on the bottom. We'll go ahead, get it slid into the actual caster block carrier itself, and then same thing, we'll put the silver shiny one with the silver shiny top hat, and then we will put the black little pin guy with the black top hat bushing dude. Once you get those into place, just like we did the first time, we'll put some Loctite on the button head screw. You do want to make sure that you lock these onto the flat portion of these pins. They are identified on the actual shaft itself and on the topper. There's going to be a flat side on it, and that's what will tell you where the flat spot is, because of course with it slid into its home, you can't see it. So now we've got those guys both locked in. We can go ahead, grab our front clip, and work on getting these guys mounted. Now, if you remember from a video or two ago, I was a little bit excited on the rear clip, but I am doing it correctly now on the front clip. The little shims, bushings do go on the inside of the arms, whereas on the rear of the car, they go on the outside, because there's no shimming to actually move the block itself forward and backward. So it's just that one locked in location. Then we can grab our larger set of pins, get those in. Same thing, just like the smaller ones on the blocks. These ones are going to have flat spots on the actual shank, the shaft itself, and that'll also have a flat spot identifier on the head of it. That way you know exactly where it is. Take our button head screws, just like we did before, and we'll go ahead and get these guys locked in. These one here, I have seen a few people that will have these back out a little bit, so definitely don't be afraid to throw an Ackermann and a Loctite on there. It's not something that you're going to take out ultra frequently, and of course, if it ever does get too terribly tight when you go to take it out, you can hit it with a little bit of heat. That way you can kind of loosen up that Loctite a little bit. Obviously very carefully, because you don't want to melt the arm at all, but there are ways to get it, and you obviously don't want it to come out while you're driving. So you can see there, we've got all 4 of our button head screws in on that side to lock everything together. And now we'll go ahead and match it on the right side of the vehicle. So we'll slide those bushings on the inside of the arm, set the caster block carrier assembly into the arm, and then slide those pins in with the flat spots facing outwards. Grab our button head screw, put a little bit of Loctite on it, and then we can go ahead and get that guy cranked down. Get our next screw on there, that way it's just ready to go. Slide the next pin in, give it a little gentle push there, make sure the flat is in the correct spot. Sometimes it takes a little twisting, as you can see. Put the Loctite on that screw, and then we can go ahead and lock that guy in. So now the main kind of portion of this spindle and carrier assembly is just about completed, because of course we do have them mounted onto the arms. And we'll go ahead and end off this bag with doing some camber links. Of course, as per usual, make sure that you identify where that line is. That way you make sure your left-hand threads are all on the same side of the vehicle. There's no requirement of doing this at all, but it does make doing setup stuff on the table a little bit easier. Go ahead and speed this up because, well, you've seen me build a couple links now already, and it is effectively the exact same process. So all we're gonna do here is just kind of get these even on both sides with the amount of threads that are showing. That way I know that the ends aren't threaded in too far one way or the other. I'm not too worried about the actual measurement of the link itself at the moment, because we'll go ahead and kind of get a little bit closer once those links are on the car. I mostly just want to make sure the threads are even from one side to the other. The other thing is, as you can see here, while I'm doing just some final looking at the book there is going to be an offset link compared to the other. That offset will go on the outside where the actual caster block is itself. Now that we've got those guys built, we can go ahead and start getting them mounted onto the car. When doing this, you'll send the screw through the caster block, you'll put a washer on it, and then you'll put the camber link, and then you'll end off with a nut on the back side to hold it all together. You can see a little bit easier here. Screw through the caster block, get that washer on, slide the camber link on, and then go ahead and get the nut started. For this, I don't lock these up just yet. I do go ahead and get all 4 bolts in these. That way, it's just a little bit easier to get them all into place. Nothing's tight or locked in yet. On the tower side, all you're gonna do here is same thing, send that bolt through. You'll put a washer on the opposite side of the tower link, and then you will go ahead and get the nut on. So we'll get this final bolt in, slide that through the tower, put the washer on the other side, slide the link on, and then we will get that nut into place. From here, now you can take your drill, throw your 2.5 in it, and kind of get everything a little bit more locked into place. What you'll notice is that once these are all the way tight, the links, of course, the total measurement is gonna be quite a bit off. So I'm just gonna eyeball it, get them right about to the right location, and then we'll do like a final measurement later on. So we'll get this final bolt tightened up, and then from here you'll see we'll speed up the footage, and then all I'm gonna do is just kind of get the camber close-ish to where it's supposed to be, not do anything ultra exact, but that is going to finish up bag H here, do a final look-see, and there we are. We are completed with the front spindle and carrier assembly.